Damascus has fallen and all of Europe is running scared. How do we know that? Watch this video and we'll show you what may not be obvious to the rest of the world. All right, folks, let's get into this one. I have to tell you, this particular story is one that a lot of news outlets are reporting, but they are reporting it for entirely different reasons for why this is actually important. There are a lot of various implications that we can pull from this story, like one of the big ones being the obvious hypocrisy that Europe continues to show the rest of the world with respect to how it treats Israel versus how it treats the rest of the world. But even more importantly than that, it gives us a lot of prime indicators as into how God might be orchestrating the theater necessary to sort of orchestrate all the things that we see are going to happen in the last days, especially after the time that we're actually raptured. So this story is remarkable in that it opens up a lot of very interesting pathways and doors into things that in the past we would have never thought it would have gone this way, especially when you consider what just happened in Syria. That took us all by surprise. We did not think that it would happen this quickly. We certainly were shocked. I know I was, by the fact that it happened the way that it actually did. I would have never thought in a million years it would have happened the way that it did. But there are some clear and obvious implications that are becoming just a whole lot more in our face, for lack of a better term. It's actually becoming a whole lot more obvious for us now than before the time that it actually happened, but that's typically the way all of these things tend to work. So let me read the headline to this article, and folks, this one's a doozy. It says, Germany and other European countries suspend decisions on Syrians' asylum bids after Assad's fall. And folks, look, I have to tell you, just the title on this one alone, you can see the obvious implications, especially if you were to substitute Europe for Israel and Syria for Palestine, shall we say. Oh my goodness. The hypocrisy in it all is just unbelievable. But that's not why we're reading this story. We're reading it for a completely different reason. So let's dig into the article. It says, Germany and several other European countries said Monday they are suspending decisions on asylum claims by Syrian nationals because of the unclear situation in their homeland following the fall of Bashar Assad. Germany's Federal Office for Migration and Refugees said Monday that more than 47,000 applications are currently pending. It said it would reassess the situation and resume decisions once things in Syria have stabilized. Okay, let me just tell you a little bit of what they're implying, or a little bit of what that means. Basically, what they are implying is that the fall of Assad no longer creates the necessity for these people who have applied for asylum to actually apply for asylum, meaning what they perceive as being the potential stabilization of the country that has become remarkably unstable is more than enough for them to put the asylum applications on hold in order to force them to stay in Syria. Okay? Imagine, folks, imagine if other countries were doing that to Palestinians. Imagine, by the way, Arab countries are doing that to Palestinians, but other countries in Europe, imagine if they were doing that. It would be the most insane havoc that could be imagined. Why? Because all this stuff is spiritual. But that's not the reason why this becomes a consequential issue. That's not the reason why this becomes a significant issue. I want you to read in between the lines, and I want you to see the bigger geopolitical implications of this. And you'll begin to see this a little bit more clearly as I read the next paragraph. It says this: Interior Ministry spokesperson Sonja Kolk noted that asylum decisions take account of the circumstances of each case, which involves assessing the situation in the applicant's country. She said the migration authority has the option of prioritizing cases from other places if a situation is unclear, as it currently is in Syria. Okay. So basically, let me just simplify what she's basically saying. She's saying that the applications that these people are filing are all subject to the current situation as it sits in their country. So for example, I could apply to your country under the auspice of seeking political asylum because I'm scared for my life. And you'll take my application. You'll actually consider it. You might even grant me temporary access into the country, into some type of a refugee camp or something like that. And while you're making the decision, if the political party that was in place or the leader that I'm trying to run from or the influencers that are affecting my status in that country change their position, then they reserve the right, the country that I'm applying to reserves the right to basically say, we no longer have an interest in seeking to grant you citizenship on the basis of asylum because these leaders are now gone from the country. Now, the problem with that is we all know good and well that a whole group of leaders can be gone, but it certainly does not wipe away your status in the midst of the culture that you were trying to run away from or the local upbringings that may have contributed to the persecution you were experiencing. But what these people are saying is they're saying, we're going to force you back into your country so that you can figure it out now that there's a new government. It doesn't matter if the new government's going to get worse, or it doesn't matter if there's not going to be a government at all. We're going to force you back into this situation. This, by the way, is a very interesting precursor into the mindset that says we are working without borders and we are more concerned about what exists within our European continent than we ever will the area that surrounds that 1040 window or is within that 1040 window, the Middle East. Now that becomes significant because when we begin to see the need for a world leader to rise up and to become the peacemaker, as we read about in the book of Revelation, this becomes a lot more consequential. But look what the article goes on to say. It says, more broadly, German officials said it's too early to tell what the fall of Assad will ultimately mean for the many Syrians who sought refuge in Germany in recent years, particularly in the mid-2010s. Now, why are they saying that when they say about particularly in the mid-2010s? Because in 2010, when Syrians were applying for refugee status, it was, of course, because of the fact that Assad was thick in the middle of a major conflict with Turkey, and the implications that existed for certain people living in Syria were far more devastating than certain people groups that may have been in that region at the time. For example, if you're a Kurd and you were in that area of Syria that's in the north that borders the area where the Kurds are in Turkey, you're in grave danger. You're in grave danger because no matter what kind of conflict exists between Turkey and Syria, both those countries are going to utilize the devastation that exists within the section where the conflict is taking place to affect a people group that they both hate. In other words, they will use their war between one another or their feud between one another as an excuse to viably just execute a group of people that neither of them want in their midst. And so they might say, well, me and you are having a disagreement, but in the meantime, we have a common enemy that we don't like. Let's get rid of them in the name of seeking to divide or seeking to deal with the feud that we're dealing with right now. So the Turks were dealing with a very difficult situation that they were facing with the Kurds at that time, just like the Syrians. And so this was an opportunity for Assad to take advantage of something that was going to become detrimental to him in the future, just like it was an opportunity for the leader of Turkey, for Erdogan. So this is something that's a very significant situation, because if you went to Germany and you applied for asylum on the basis of political persecution that had existed in that time, then they might stop and reevaluate the application, not completely understanding that your situation is actually getting worse, not better. Because if you're a Kurd and you're in the north, you still have the problem that exists where some of the rebels, as they would call them, the terrorists, as I would call them, still don't like the Kurds and actually will go out of their way to destroy Kurdish lives because they see them in opposition to their ultimate purpose of taking over all of Syria, especially the area to the north, neighboring Turkey, because, of course, as you know, when you look at the terrorist organization that overthrew Assad, you'll realize that they are friendly to Turkey, and as a matter of fact, they've been encouraged by Turkey, which means the potential for Turkey to step in and take over in that region is a whole lot higher, and that means that those people that are seeking refugee status are actually in graver danger. But what's interesting is Germany, as well as many other countries, are not looking at that dynamic. Rather, they are looking at it as an opportunity to get rid of these people that they are looking at as burdens on their own economy, on their own GDP, and actually on their own national security. And they are going to use it as an excuse to wash them out. Now, that becomes significant because that means we're going to start seeing some major restructuring in Europe. More on that to come. Let's continue reading the article. It says this: Interior Minister Nancy Faeser said it's not yet possible to predict, quote, concrete possibilities to return, and, quote, it would be unserious to speculate about this in such a volatile situation. In other words, there's war going on. So we're not going to speculate, even though these people have been applying for 10 years. We're not going to create any speculative kind of notions about what's going on. And we don't want to be quick to act on these asylum applications. Now, let me just simply say this. I'm not saying that that type of reasoning is terrible altogether, because in some contexts, they actually have to suspend these asylum applications because whoever is in power who fills that vacuum may actually take a position that would be friendly, and it could end up helping the status of Europe as they have been hosting these Syrian asylums. It could be, okay? But the problem is that may not necessarily be the case. And if things get more worse and people begin to start dying as a result of them pushing everybody off, you will have a certain level of instability that will kick off in European nations that will force them to come together more than they already come together. You could begin to see more unions take place in Europe than you've ever seen before. You could see the formation of superstates like they've already been talking about. And by the way, make no mistake about it, as they have been talking about forming these superstates, like for example, within the European Union, they've been talking about doing this for a long time. One of the stated reasons why they actually want to do this is to deal with the asylees problem. They want to deal with the people who are asking for asylum because there's a commonality that exists between all of these European countries, where they are looking for a way to deal consistently with them so that they don't redirect the flow of refugees from one point to another or one place in Europe to another, thus creating an imbalance that could destabilize the region. That is something that they're all talking about. And all of that means something. It all is something that really does matter in what they're trying to do here. By the way, I don't want to sound offensive when I say this. I don't want to sound out of control when I say this. But the first thing that these countries are thinking about after something like Syria has happened is not about the health and welfare of the citizens of Syria. What they're actually thinking about is they're thinking about the implications that these refugees might have on their countries. And they know that one of the bigger areas that keep these countries from developing the way that they need them to develop are refugees. They know that. Listen, they're watching this happening in real time. You don't have to get into the weeds to understand the fact that this is a significant problem. And if they are serious about wanting to address this problem, the conclusion that they're eventually going to come to, and I'm telling you, this is going to happen, the place that they're going to have to go to is that small little area where they decide that as European nations, they're going to have to come together to allow these refugees to be controlled in a way that's going to make more sense. They have to be consistent in their policy. They can't be consistent in their policy unless they stand together and unified with a common understanding and a common law, and they can't do that unless they are regionalizing. And if they regionalize, then that means you are going to begin to see lots of small countries become one big country or become one big association or region, and we may very well get into the Revelation 17 scenario, okay? So this is a very interesting thing to be seeing happening right now, and I'm going to tell you this, it's getting worse by the moment, okay? Let's go on. Look at this fact, by the way. This is so staggering. Look at this. Her ministry said, as of October 31st, there were 974,136 Syrian nationals in the country, the majority of whom had some kind of refugee or other protected status. Folks, 1 million Syrian refugees, 1 million just in their country. So when everybody starts talking about all this stuff happening in Gaza and all the problems that are going on, nobody's talking about the millions of Syrians who are being displaced and the hundreds of thousands, potentially almost 1 million Syrians that have already been killed. No one's talking about that stuff. They're not going to talk about that stuff. I promise you that, because of the inconsistency. As the Bible tells us, in the last days, we'll see an increase in anti-Semitism, and the anti-Semitism that the international community has continues to cause them to not be objective in understanding the facts as they sit. This is nothing that should surprise us, folks. As a matter of fact, the establishment of these facts is a non-issue if you simply look at it on its face. It's a pretty heavy thing. Look what the article goes on to say. It says, in neighboring Austria, Chancellor Karl Nehammer also asked his interior minister with suspending decisions on current asylum applications by Syrians, the Austria press agency reported. It is important, here's the quote, it is important to first establish facts, to put asylum and family reunion procedures on hold. And by the way, this is the Australian foreign minister who's saying this, Alexander Schellenberg. And the Australian foreign minister goes on to say, we need to wait until the dust settles so we can see what is happening, what the next points are. Look at this, folks. Sweden, their migration agency said it will also pause decisions on Syrian asylum cases, arguing that it isn't possible at present to assess applications' reasons for seeking protection. It didn't specify how long the pause would start, but said a similar decision was made in connection with the Taliban's return to power in Afghanistan in 2021. But what they're not telling you about the Afghanistan issue in 2021 is that they had for a long period of time held any Afghani requests for asylum for security reasons, okay? So these are completely different things. They are happening for completely different reasons, and they're comparing massive apples to little oranges. I'm telling you that right now, okay? They're not being accurate with it. Look at this, folks. In Finland, the director of the Department for International Protection at the Finnish Immigration Service, Antti Lichtman, told public broadcaster YLE that decisions have been suspended there, and he can't immediately estimate when they will resume. In Norway, the Directorate of Immigration announced a similar decision, saying it has put asylum applications from Syria on hold until further notice. France says it was considering following Germany's example. And here's the quote, by the way, this is from the French Interior Ministry. They say, we are working on a suspension of ongoing asylum files from Syria. We should reach a decision in the coming hours. The ministry said 450 applications from Syrian citizens are pending in France. And of course, France is going to put a hold on it, just like all of the other European nations. You want to know why? Because they're all on the same page and they are all saying the same things. They have coordinated this with one another. And folks, I'm going to tell you this right now. The only way that they're going to escape the fury from all of the international community that is outside of that immediate area is to simply argue that Europe as a whole cannot take this situation and that they must force or seek a more aggressive solution in Syria. And the way that they're going to seek a more aggressive solution is going to be by coming against Israel. They are going to put it on Israel to come up with this type of solution. And if they don't put it on Israel, they are understandably going to seek to further sanction Russia because they're going to say that Russia is complicit in the situation that's actually happening. And quite frankly, let me just simply say what Russia is lying in wait to do. Russia, of course, took a new political asylum request into Moscow just recently. You know who that is? Of course, that is Assad. They now have Assad in Moscow, and I can guarantee you the reason why they are keeping him there is because they are going to use Assad as justification to march back into Syria and to take whatever it is that they want, because they will not allow their bases to go away. As a matter of fact, if you watch the interview that I did or that I commented on with Lavrov and Tucker Carlson, he talks all about this very indirectly. And when that interview took place, it was before everything happened in Syria. Folks, all I'm saying is this. You've got to read between the lines. You've got to understand that Europe is running scared because for the first time, they are recognizing that they have a much larger security problem on their hands. For the first time, they're realizing that their economy will not survive a mass group of refugees coming into their cities. And they all are beginning to realize for the first time that they're not going to be able to handle this problem alone, that they're going to need to stand unified. And it's going to have to be something a lot less superficial than NATO, or a lot less superficial than I'll spot you over here while you spot me over here. It's going to have to be an effort to the likes of which we saw when they began to develop the euro. It's going to be the same type of thing. They're going to have to stand together as a group of European nations. They are going to develop superstates. They have to do it. At least they're going to do it unofficially before they make it official. And they are going to stand together on their European-wide. It's going to be a Europe-wide policy with how they deal with Syrian refugees. And by the way, just mark my words, they're going to use this policy to manage and shape how they end up dealing with Israel. It is going to give them a more permanent solution for what they're seeking to provide for the anti-Semitic stance that they continue to take. They are going to put Israel at task, and they are going to blame Israel for some of the destabilization that's going on, especially considering the fact that Israel just created a buffer zone on the Golan Heights section of Syria, which is, of course, the border that they share. And they're going to also blame Israel for the bombing of the chemical weapons facilities. But I think Israel was prudent to do that. They had to do that, and they had to create that condition that would, of course, dismantle Syria, because if they did it, then they themselves stand as sitting ducks, and they're not going to allow that to happen. As a matter of fact, you will see me do a story on this tomorrow or the next day. We'll be releasing it on the subject of Bibi and what he's saying concerning this very situation and the obligation that he believes rests upon him and Israel to actually secure the region on the basis of making sure that the only real democratic ally of the West is in grave danger, and they're going to seek to protect the interests of that nation, and he's going to claim of the West. And I think that he is not wrong in doing so, and I actually think that it's necessary, because if he didn't, he would be negligent as the Prime Minister of Israel. All of this to say, folks, that so much is beginning to come together. As you begin to see things destabilize, as you begin to perceive the things that appear to be falling apart, as you begin to watch and understand all of the things that are happening around you, just know that God is taking all these little bits and pieces and he's using it to form some new geopolitical alliances. And those geopolitical alliances are going to line up with the things that we read about in Revelation. They're going to line up with the things that we read about in the book of Daniel. They're going to line up with all of the things that the Bible warns us concerning. And folks, it is incredible. So I'm here to tell you, stay tuned. Lots more information is coming. Keep your eyes up. Keep looking, because Christ can come at any moment. And folks, let me just reiterate something. This is the most exciting time to be alive as a Christian. There's no greater time to be alive. This is incredible what we're watching. God is faithful. He's doing amazing things. He never gets it wrong. His word is always right. We have a lot to look forward to. So pay attention. Study the word. Keep looking to the Lord. Ask God to help you develop wisdom and discernment on reading through the lines that the world can't read through because they're blind spiritually. You have to be able to look to the Lord and say, God, show me. And I promise you, he will. Why? Because his word gives us all the answers. It's that simple. So folks, get out there, fight the good fight, do what God has called you to do, and watch him do great things. God bless you.